Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of my Web Fundamentals for Hackers series. In this episode I want to cover HTTP verbs, what they are and what each means in detail. Broadly speaking, there are three categories of verbs. There's the category of getting data, category of sending data, and debug data. The get data category has get method, head method. In the send data we have post, put, patch, and delete. In the debug section we have options, trace, and connect, and we'll talk about those in a minute in more detail. In this example we are getting blog.php. As you can see there, we have the get header in the middle. The server then responds with the headers and the response body of blog.php, and then our browser then renders the welcome. To summarize, get should only ever be used to get a representation of some information. It should never be used to actually make changes to a database or a data structure. It can be used to query a database, but should not be used to modify said database or anything similar to that. Here we have an example of a classic GET request where the parameters of the GET request will be appended to the first line of the HTTP request. In this case we are getting blog.php, but we're also asking for a category of cyber and sorting by the age value. So therefore it will actually modify the way the page responds, but it won't actually be inserting or modifying any kind of data, merely the representation of said data. This is also a demonstration of how you can actually send GET request parameters or any parameters in the first line of the request, as you will see very much on day-to-day engagements. In this example, we have the website blog.com that accepts user input in the form of a post request. Here we're going to send the string subscribe in our comment. The string subscribe will then be included in the post body of our HTTP request. As you can see here, we have comment equals subscribe. The server will then process that, and depending on how it's configured, in our case, we'll then respond with that user input as, in our case, a paragraph, a HTML, comment, subscribe, and then the browser will then render that back to the user. And any other users, should that data be stored in a database and a user, say, queries it using a GET request. As previously touched on, a post request can contain a body, and that body can include, say, a name-value pair, for example, a parameter, or to any number. It could also include, say, a file, or something like base64, or anything like that. The file could also be binary as well. Often a successful post request will be resulted in a 200 or a 201 status code. This may not apply to all cases, where, for example, the user input is invalid, but the page simply responds with a 200, say, hey, yes, your input was accepted, but not actually carried out, say, on a database. I'll be releasing a detailed video on status codes in this series, so keep an eye out for that. To summarize, in a post to a GET request, a post request's default action is intended to make a modification to some form of data structure, for example, making a comment which will then be inserted into a database and then queried in future, for example. One key difference between posts and GET requests versus the other ones is that in a post and GET request, when we refer to a certain path where we expect that path, that file, that resource to process the information we provide, for example, post parameters or GET parameters, whereas in, say, a put request, which you'll see in a minute, where we are referring directly to that URI and the server is actually meant to handle, replacing the data, deleting the data, etc. Next, let's take a look at a head request, which is basically a GET request, except there's no response body returned. This is effectively used for seeing if a URI is up, or merely just doing some enumeration of the server, what it's running and headers, etc. In this example, we send a head request to blog.php. In the response, we can only see the headers and no body. Next, let's look at a put request. A put request is used to put some data on the server at the URI provided. In this case, uploads myfile.txt. The data provided is in the request body, in this case sec_aura, and welcome to my site. Let's go ahead and make a GET request to where we put it. We go ahead and make a GET request to /upload/myfile.txt. The server will then respond with a body including our message we sent earlier, our request body of sec_aura, welcome to my site. So we have effectively written a file to the server. From a security perspective, this is particularly interesting, as we could say, for example, write some PHP code to the server, for which is then executed by, say, Apache and the PHP interpreter, and therefore get what is known as a reverse shell. More on that later, or a web shell. It is, however, worth mentioning that not a lot of servers will accept put by default, at least without credentials or authentication. However, there will be examples, for example, WebDAV, where you can actually use put and manage to get a reverse shell. I'll link to that here. Next, let's take a look at the patch method. The put method will replace data, the entire thing, whereas the patch method will only replace the data in the request body, for example, a little bit of JSON. Here we make a GET request to myfile.txt. It then responds with a little bit of JSON saying please subscribe. Let's go ahead and use a patch and replace the please subscribe to sec aura. And here we can see it in the response, please subscribe to sec aura. We then have the delete method, which as you can imagine deletes a resource at the URI, in this case the URI of /upload/myfile.txt. Next we have the options method, which effectively asks the server what methods are allowed on that particular URI, in this case what options are allowed at the root of the web server. Next we have the trace method. This is used for debugging of proxies and tunnels. In this case we send trace root. The server then responds with the top part, which is the response of that server, and then the response body is then the response from the server behind that via the proxy tunnel. In this case it's showing, hey, this is what we received, and the exported headers show where it came from, etc. Next we have the connect method. The connect method is used to create a proxy tunnel or SSH tunnel. As you can see here, we use the connect method, and then the tunnel has been established, and then therefore after that, all the data will go via the tunnel. Congratulations, you're now one step closer to being a web hacker. Join me in my next video and my series to learn more, develop, grow, and become the best web hacker. Oh, and like and subscribe, that'd be super helpful. Thanks, bye.